Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today for Let's Go Electric, Westchester County Electric School Bus webinar. If you haven't already, please put your name and your school district name into the chat and maybe the name of the organization if you're affiliated with one. If you're tuning in from outside of Westchester, thank you for being with us. Most of the information presented today is relevant statewide, so glad to have you. I'm Sarah Smiley. I'm a volunteer with the Westchester Rivertowns team of Mothers Out Front, and I'm here alongside the Northern Westchester team of Mothers Out Front. We want to thank County Executive George Latimer and his Director of Energy Conservation and Sustainability, Peter McCart, for partnering with us to host this event. And we'd also love to thank our event co-sponsors. The need to electrify our school buses is an especially important topic because just 2 weeks ago, Governor Hochul announced her proposals that all school bus purchases must be zero emissions by 2027 and calls for full fleet electrification by 2035. Our Mothers Out Front teams have been advocating for electric school buses because they are better for our climate and our children's health, and because they would provide long-term cost savings for our districts. We know there are challenges to overcome in order to meet the governor's goals. More funding is key, given the upfront cost of electric buses, as is better access to existing state funds. My team was fortunate to find a champion in State Assemblyman Tom Avenatti, who offered the Terrytown district funding to help cover the difference in cost to purchase its first electric school bus, which we're hoping will be purchased this year. Our Northern Westchester team celebrated the Croton-Harmon district's vote to purchase electric school buses and NYSERDA's approval of their grant application. While we are excited about these successes, we need solutions for our schools to plan for whole fleet transitions and charging infrastructure. And we need options that work for all districts, whether they own, lease, or outsource their bus services. We hope that today's webinar will be a jumping off point for working on those solutions together. We'll start with remarks from 3 of our elected officials, then we'll hear from 2 of our districts about their experiences. NYSERDA, NYPA, and Con Edison will share programs that can help with our fleet transitions. And finally, Patty Buchanan of Croton 100 will share a valuable tool for calculating the total cost of ownership of electric buses and long-term savings. We'll have a short Q&A after each panelist, as well as time at the end for additional questions. So we ask that you please use the Q&A function to ask those questions. You'll find that the Q&A button down at the bottom next to the chat and raise hand buttons. So continue to use the chat to introduce yourself and use the Q&A to ask your questions. And with that, I will turn it over to our first speaker, County Executive George Latimer, who will be joining us by phone. County Executive?
Sarah, thank you very much. George Latimer here. I'm happy to be with you as part of this forum, and particularly want to celebrate Mothers Out Front for their leadership on this issue. It is a long road to get from where we are today to where you want to be, but the energy and the drive that Sarah and Megan and other leaders of this organization have, I think is going to be the key to it. We're happy in the county government to be a partner in this. Peter McCart, who is part of our executive team, has been just tremendous resource for us on all matters of environmental issues and energy and conservation and so forth. And I salute Peter for his work on all of this, and he will continue to be a liaison to this group. And we know you've got some terrific panelists coming up, so I'm not going to take much time with general comments. You want to hear from White Plains School District and Croton-Harmon and NYSERDA and NYPA and Con Ed and so forth. What I do want to point out is exactly what you're advocating for in the various districts, the 44 school districts of Westchester County, is exactly what Westchester County government has embarked on, and that is the full electrification of our bus system. Now, the Beeline bus system carries the 2nd largest number of bus riders every day of any bus system in New York State, clearly behind the New York City bus transit system. But we have more bus riders every day than Nassau or Suffolk, both of which have bigger populations than we do, the Erie, Buffalo area transit, and then also the Albany area transit. So we understand what it is to have a large number of riders. And the Beeline bus system pales in comparison to the number of school buses that exist around the county. Outside of the urban districts that generally do not have busing, we have a large number of districts that do provide busing, and so there's a lot of vehicles on the road. The decision that we've made, and it will take some time for us to implement, but we're well on our way, is that for reasons that both involve proper environmental policy, as well as cost savings, we do well to transform our diesel bus system into an electric or hybrid electric system. There are certain, logistical issues that we have to deal with. We have bus garages in Yonkers and Valhalla that have to be fully retrofitted with the equipment necessary to provide charging for those buses. That's a capital expense. The buses themselves are more expensive. And so we benefited from the largesse of our federal government officials, our former Congress members, Nita Lowey and Elliot Engel, our current Congress members, Mondaire Jones and Jamal Bowman, also Sean Patrick Maloney, have all been tremendous assets in helping us get some additional money so we could purchase the electric buses. And we know that because we do have articulated buses, which are double length, and it requires a lot of pulling power to negotiate some of the hills on the western side of the county. The topography alongside the Hudson River in places like Yonkers and Ossining and Peekskill have some pretty steep slopes. And we have to adjust our bus fleet to what the capacities are. But we know that whether it's just the way an individual reacts when you're standing on a street corner and a Beeline bus goes by and you don't get a face full of diesel exhaust, or the more cosmic realities that we're spending less money on purchasing fossil fuels than we've ever had before with a converted bus system, we have a tremendous opportunity here to improve our carbon footprint. And if we can do it, in theory, every other single entity that operates or contracts for buses can do it as well. Our experience, as we're sort of the canary in the tunnel, going first on these things, will be things that school districts can learn from. And if we make any mistakes, let us make them, and we'll fix them, and then you'll observe it, and you'll learn from those mistakes and hopefully not repeat them. But we're committed to doing this as a county bus system, and we're committed to helping you in the various school districts do the same thing, because at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. With that, I appreciate being able to say hello, to congratulate Mothers Out Front, all the good people that are involved in this organization, and to look forward not just the way this webinar goes, but for the days ahead when we work together and we see progress made on this project.
Thank you so much, County Executive. We really appreciate the county's leadership on moving the county fleet forward, and for your support with moving forward to electric school buses. And really appreciate your point about what an impact it can make on our local air quality by making that transition. And with that, I'm pleased to turn it over to our next speaker, New York State Assemblyman Thomas Avenatti.
There we go. Hi. First of all, good morning. Is it still good morning? Nope, it's afternoon. It's been that kind of a day. Anyway, good afternoon. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you. I was very pleased to be able to get a grant for the Terrytown school system. And I do look forward to having that electric bus to ride around in my district in the very near future. We did have some supply chain problems. This is a different kind of supply chain. This is bureaucratic supply chain. It took a while to move the paper from one desk to another and to get approvals, but I'm hopeful that bus will be out on the road very, very soon. This is something that we did quite some time ago, thanks to Mothers Out Front. They had the vision and the drive, so to speak, to reach out to me and to say, okay, come on, get us some state money. What can we do here? But it takes people like Mothers Out Front to change the way we view our society, to change the way we move around our community, to make sure that we are doing things that are healthy and that make sense. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but what we save, what we spend on buying a zero emissions bus, we're going to save in the health of our kids and in the health of our communities. There's some research out there that talks about how pollution levels of school buses often exceed the surrounding areas by 5 to 10 times. And there's research that talks about how children on a diesel school bus are exposed to 5 to 15 times more air toxins than the rest of the population. So it's really worth the investment. in the health of our kids and in the health of our community. You know, and this is part of a trend. Just yesterday, I was able to vote for a piece of legislation that was agreed to between the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor to move our community, our entire state, to a zero emissions transportation system. It's going to take a while, but the first thing that you have to do is get business on board. And the bill that we were dealing with sets as a target, I think it's 2035 or 2040. We want to have all vehicles in the state that are sold in the state, all new motor vehicles sold in the state, to be zero emissions. Now that's an ambitious goal, but it's a goal that's worth trying. And it's a goal that we want to try to achieve, because we understand that the transportation sector provides a significant amount of the pollution in our community. You know, if you take a look at downtown areas, when I was a county legislator, we passed a bill to ban motor vehicle idling for more than 3 minutes, because we realized, particularly in our inner cities, when a vehicle is idling, the pollution goes up and comes right back down again. I have on my calendar right now in the Assembly, ready for debate, a bill to do the same thing statewide. I see Senator Harkin is here. He's the Senate sponsor of the bill. So hopefully together, it's a small piece, but you know what? We've got to put all these little pieces together, and that's how we clean the air. That's how we make things much better for all of us. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to go get that grant, because it was all your idea. And so, and thank you for your efforts. You guys are doing a great job. Keep it up.
Assemblyman, thank you so much. We are super excited about that grant, and we'll be looking forward to riding that electric school bus with you for the first time as soon as we can get it. We're so grateful for that, and very exciting to hear about the work you're doing on state legislation to move transportation forward. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, we'll turn to our next speaker, another climate champion, both for the environment in general and for electric school buses. State Senator Pete Harkin is here.
Sarah, thank you so much. And it's great to be with everybody, and everybody, Mothers Out Front, thank you for all you do. And certainly thank you to all of the sponsors. Great to be here with the county executive, and certainly my partner in the Assembly, Tom Avenatti. We do a lot of work on these issues together, as he mentioned, the anti-idling bill. And Tom, thank you for mentioning my zero emissions auto sales bill by 2035. That was a big win for all of us, and thank you for your support and hard work on getting that passed. You know, you've heard all of the environmental reasons why we need to do it: particulate matter, climate change. You know, Westchester County is a non-attainment zone for the Clean Air Act, on and on and on. So we know why it's important to do, but how do we get there? And as George mentioned, being the canary in the coal mine, the few school districts that have started down this road, it can be very challenging. NYPA and NYSERDA are our partners, but some of this is new for them too. And so I just, in fact, got off a Zoom at noon with the president of NYSERDA, Doreen Harris, and she wants to be a good partner in this. She and her agency want to be consumer friendly. She is aware that some of the concerns that you have raised to me, I passed on to her. And some of the restrictions with the funding programs are federal. And so NYSERDA is negotiating with the federal government to try and ease some of those regulatory burdens, like linking it to decommissioning an older bus, as opposed to just getting a clean bus in the fleet. So they are working on it, and they are good partners. As was mentioned by Sarah at the beginning, the governor has made this a priority. Starting in 2027, all school districts can only purchase zero emissions vehicles. And then the goal is by 2035, all buses on the road will be zero emissions. Well, how do we get there? Partly from the federal transportation aid that we've gotten. We're getting I believe it's $150 million to go for building out our charging and our grid infrastructure to accommodate the influx of electronic vehicles. And then we're going to be passing, hopefully with your support, a $4 billion bond act, an environmental resiliency bond act, this election day, And there will be certainly money in there for schools as well. Senator Kennedy has a bill about funding school buses to transfer the fleets to zero emissions. So that's something that I'm co-sponsoring and working closely with Senator Kennedy on. And there's another ancillary benefit of this, is creating good jobs right here in New York. So George mentioned the hybrid and electric buses in Westchester. So in our state budget last year that Tom and I worked on, we included $20 million for electric buses for non-MTA fleets. We want to do that again this year for school bus fleets. But that money goes to local bus companies like Beeline. And where are those drivetrains manufactured? Where are the hybrid drivetrains and the electronic drivetrains manufactured? In Binghamton, New York. So by doing this now and leading the way, we are creating good paying jobs right here in New York State. So it's so important that we really get out in front of this, because the sooner we get out in front, the more jobs we can create in New York, and these jobs aren't lost to Illinois, Ohio, and Texas. So it's good for the environment. It's good for the health of our children. It's great for the economy of New York. And this is really going to be the future of our economy, or these high-paying, quality green jobs that will be created by doing things like transferring our bus fleets. So I thank you all for your commitment to this. If you ever have any issues with state agencies, and they're terrific, they're really great folks who work for the state. But obviously, as Tom said, sometimes paper gets stuck on one desk or the next. Feel free to call my office. I put my phone number in the chat. Both Tom and I are here to help. And we look forward to working with you as we remake the transportation system in New York. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator, so much. It's great to know that you're such a strong support for local school districts here and all the work you're doing at the state level to help get more funding for these purposes. And yeah, certainly looking forward to all the jobs it will create in New York State as well. That's a huge benefit, aside from all the climate benefits and the air quality benefits that this will achieve. One question that just popped up for you, I believe, just clarification, the $4 billion bond act, that is for a whole host of things, right? And you're looking for a portion of that for electric school buses?
Right. It's for a variety of things. It's for wetlands, for resiliency, for flooding, but also for environmental projects and improving the grid. And we can sector some of that money for the transportation sector as well.
Great, thank you. And one other question that you might be able to answer in terms of, I think, maybe just generally the funding that you're working on through the legislation, if it would apply for districts that own their own buses in addition to those that contract out, or is that still something that's being worked out?
I think it's being worked out. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I will double check on this. In the governor's executive budget, she refers to own and lease. I don't think her language speaks to contracted out buses, but if it does not, that's certainly something that the Senate and the Assembly can put in our one house budgets as we go into the three-way negotiation. And I know Assemblyman Avenatti and I are happy to work on that together.
Great, thank you so much. That's very helpful. Now I am pleased to turn the mic over to Mothers Out Front volunteer leader, Christy Cohen.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm a mother of two and a member of the Northern Westchester chapter of the Mothers Out Front climate group. Mothers Out Front is a multi-state organization that advocates for safe, sustainable, livable climate. We're here today to learn the ins and outs of how to electrify our school bus fleets, but primarily we are gathering here to save the future of the planet. As parents and educators, we are preparing for the future by supporting this campaign and the many others that are working towards clean, renewable, and ultimately zero emissions energy. This event is a result of statewide ongoing efforts of the Mothers Out Front team the experts in the clean energy field speaking today, and the environmental organizations that co-sponsored this event. In order to mitigate the effects of this climate crisis, we need to join forces and act as quickly as possible. We hope that this event is the first of many so that we can continue to prioritize a healthy environment for our children. And now a short video from a mom who gets to the heart of the matter, all of our children, and how our actions make a brighter, safer, and more breathable future. Thank you. Sound is off.
Hi, my name is Millie Beresteggi. I have 2 children ages 8 and 3. I joined Mothers Out Front last year because it's a place where parents can advocate for their children. As a mother and citizen of this beautiful planet, I'm concerned about what our kids will be facing in the future because of climate change. I felt it was important to be involved in helping make the right changes happen. An issue that I feel is important to me is the effects of fumes from the school buses they ride twice a day, 5 days a week. Studies show that children who ride on diesel buses will have increased asthma, allergies, more incidence of bronchitis, and in the future, they can be at increased risk for lung disease like cancer and emphysema. We have to worry about the immediate dangers of fossil fuels and also be concerned about how much carbon the buses are emitting that keeps heating up our planet. I'm so proud to advocate with Mothers Out Front and see the change start in our own district transportation and the purchase of our first electric school bus. It's important to normalize these conversations with our children and show them how much we care by taking action. These small steps add up to giant leaps, and it's our responsibility as citizens of this world to take care of it.
Thank you so much, Christy. And thank you, Millie, for your message on that video. Now we'll hear from the White Plains School District about their experience using electric school buses. So I'll turn the panel over to Dr. Joseph Rica, White Plains Superintendent, who will be followed by Sergio Alfonso, their Transportation Supervisor.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks to Mothers Out Front, and really thanks to everybody for this opportunity this afternoon to come together as a state. I see there are people from all over the state of New York attending this afternoon to talk about the future. And I think, you know, sometimes we kind of become very complacent and thinking about the future or innovation or change can be daunting. For instance, one of the major issues that folks talk about when it comes to talking about electric school buses or EV transportation in general is the cost. Well, you know, I always draw us back a few years ago to when VCRs seemed to be out of reach in terms of cost, or when, you know, initially home computers because of cost. You know, this was early on in the tech, and it was early adopters and innovators who helped to make sure that the costs of those products that right now almost everybody anywhere can take advantage of become accessible to the general public. But more, I think, when we're talking about school buses, and we're talking about electric school buses in particular, we have an obligation as educators and community members to ensure that for every step we take with regard to our children, we're maximizing their health and their safety. We know that pollution levels, particularly pollution levels as they're connected to school buses, are far too high. We know that children, particularly children in urban centers where levels of carbon dioxide are extraordinarily higher, suffer disproportionately with lung-related issues and general health issues. This is something that we need to do for every one of our kids, both children of today and children of tomorrow. In White Plains, we were really, really fortunate to have extraordinary partnerships with not only our transportation provider, National Express, but also with Con Ed, NYSERDA, and others to be able to allow us the opportunity to pilot 5 fully electric school buses in partnership with Lion Electric for the last several years. Now, my partner, Sergio Alfonso, is going to talk a bit about the experiences that we have, but I can tell you from my perspective and my interactions, not only with our children and our community, these buses have been extraordinarily popular, and the kids can't wait to ride on them. Why? No, because they're better. They're quieter, they're more comfortable. Any of the residual smog or exhaust that you would get on a typical school bus is completely eliminated. And the ride itself is a nicer ride. We've seen that for years now. We know that as we progress into this plan, and as the rest of the state continues to progress toward electric school buses, that other communities are going to benefit from those very same positive experiences. So I'm thrilled to hear about the Terrytown School District, and certainly Croton is just great. As we move towards 2035, working together, I do believe we'll be able to achieve these goals, and making sure that we're thinking about the future and thinking about future generations is our responsibility, each and every one of us. So with that, I'm happy to turn over to Sergio Alfonso, my partner in the White Plains City School District Transportation Office. And Sergio, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ricca, and thank you to Sarah for the opportunity to join you all today. And thank you again for all the great work that everyone on this webinar and on this panel continues to do. You know, these are really, truly exciting times. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of things, I did want to begin with a little more background on our pilot program here in White Plains. The White Plains City School District, as Dr. Ricca mentioned, in partnership with our provider, National Express, began a pilot program in the fall of 2018, where the district deployed 5 Lion Electric Type C school buses. My job, through careful planning, we were able to deploy 1 bus at each one of our 5 elementary schools, selecting the routes that made the most logistical sense. Now in year 3, we've expanded on that. Our buses have now or since been integrated into rotation and are being used throughout the district as part of our day-to-day operations. We've even ventured into using these buses on athletics and field trips. Just on a side note, because I have a mind that's absolutely fascinated by finding solutions to these challenges that sometimes come with logistics, it's been a lot of fun, and I'm super grateful to have had this opportunity. Some of the key players to help kick off the program were NYSERDA, who was able to secure a grant for each vehicle of $120,000 to the truck voucher program. Con Edison contributed $100,000 per bus to test the operational viability of the vehicle-to-grid system. National Express, our transportation provider, and of course, Lion Electric, the manufacturer. It's through these partnerships that we were able to reduce the upfront cost of each vehicle to that comparable of what a diesel vehicle would cost. And that's just a little background on our current system. So to get into the nuts and bolts, Lion suggests that savings between 14 to 18% TCO, your total cost of ownership compared to diesel vehicles. In addition, the vehicle efficiency data gathered through the onboard resource, suggests 33% reduction in cost. You know, our operator continues to collect these metrics, but it's still too soon to know where we are based off the data we have. As far as maintenance, you know, these are first generation Lion buses. So just like with any new technology, you can expect to have some level of challenges. They did take a little time to get used to, but I'm happy to report that the EVs are out of service for maintenance consistent with their diesel equivalent. Overall, we find that these buses run very well, and they've had few operational issues. Our operator reports savings of fuel and maintenance costs estimated to be about $10,000 per year in savings. Our operator also reports that the non-vehicle to grid units seem to work better in terms of durability. In terms of battery, the bus battery ranges between 9 and 11 years, and you have a battery range of between 70 and 80 miles per charge. The charging is done at the bus depot where the buses are stationed and parked, and the bus company has 5 level 2 chargers. Your vehicle to grid system, first of its kind in New York, more uncharted territory. In partnership with NuWave, the vehicle to grid system or program, started in December of 2020. The goal, of course, of this program is to help make these electric school buses more economically feasible. but it's been only a little bit over a year, and it's also too soon to calculate these metrics. But our stakeholders, all the stakeholders are optimistic that the program will yield meaningful savings in the long term. And lastly, just to piggyback off what Dr. Ricca said, you know, true to our community's commitment to the well-being of our students, these EVs have been extremely well received with enthusiasm, and everybody wants to be a part of this project.
Great, thank you so much, Sergio and Dr. Ricca. Really glad that White Plains is being an innovator on this to, as you said, to get the ball rolling. And I'm really happy to hear about all the savings that are already apparent and just how much everyone loves those buses. I'd love to pause now to see if there are any questions. And we have a couple of team members monitoring the Q&A and the chat.
Any chance that we have an opportunity to talk about something other than COVID-19 is always a wonderful day.
Chance I have to speak about experience is a wonderful day.
And I also mentioned that we do have a representative here from Lion Electric who could also help answer questions, I think.
Sarah, most of the questions will be answered in the following panelists and presentations, so we're going to leave them till then.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. Well, I guess maybe I'll just pose one question, if you don't mind, Sergio. If you might be able to just speak to what you think is needed to move forward. You have this great pilot program going now. How do you envision sort of transitioning in the future, more vehicles in your fleet, or what do you think is needed?
I think continued partnership with not only the current stakeholders, but also taking the opportunity with the incentives that are out right now, and just making sure we get in front of what's out there with what's coming in terms of.
And we need to invest. You know, like anything else, we need to ensure that we're planning in our long range plan to ensure that we're investing in this strategic goal. You know, in our school district, we're always looking for ways to become more sustainable, and electric vehicles are part of that overall long range plan. And you know, it just so happens now that we had this opportunity, it really fit in nicely.
Sarah, we do have two good questions that came through.
Great, go ahead.
First one is, can you speak about emergency dismissals? You know, in charging time and fast charging, have you set up any sort of procedures for that, or have any experience with it?
Great question. So they are level 2 fast chargers. They're not the DC fast chargers. So these vehicles are charged just like a diesel bus would be fueled in between, let's say, morning and afternoon routes. So the vehicles are being constantly charged. So if a driver comes back after their morning shift, it's immediately plugged in just to prepare just in the event of an emergency.
And the other question is the $10,000 saving mentioned by Sergio savings per bus or all 5 buses? And it's probably all 5 buses, yeah.
Yeah, that's also a great question. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
On the county's new buses, we're saving $1 million a year in fuel costs. That was before COVID. Now it's changed a little bit, you know, since then.
That's a great demonstration of the scale, right? So we're running 5. As you continue to build out, you can anticipate that you're going to have larger savings. And if you couple that with other sustainability measures, like for instance, solar and other avenues, school districts can actually become much more, well, not much more, but can actually continue to generate revenue in novel ways that can help, again, to support their local communities by potentially reducing annual cost increases.
Great, thank you. I see there is a question in the chat also asking about the battery range and how it compares to the typical bus route lengths.
You know, we've found that the buses, and this is, of course, the cold weather is a factor, is between 70 and 80 miles. I would say typical standard, and if there's someone from the manufacturer can correct me on this, is between 170 and 200 miles. 180. Close.
We're closer.
Great. Peter, were there any other questions?
There is one question, but I don't think it's for this group. E-bus funding sources for school districts who are not eligible for the VW settlement funds. I think we'll have to leave that to NYSERDA and NYPA and Con Ed when we get to them, unless somebody can answer it.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I also see, I'm sorry, Thomas Orville from Lion Electric is here. So.
Yeah, hi everyone, Orville Thomas from Lion, and kind of building off of what Sergio said. When it comes to range, what we've seen across the country, and data supports this, is about 95% of school bus routes, typically morning and return back home, are under 80 miles. And so what we have for Lion are battery configurations that can allow the school district, based on price, to do 100 miles, 120 miles, or a maximum of 155. And then when we talk with schools, they kind of put it into their charging plan of what is going to be that really quick charge after that first route, or in the middle of the day, or right before that second route, or athletic. So I believe that even the lowest kind of battery configuration range should be good for almost every school district in the country. Obviously, there are some that are more rural, but that's why we have, and other manufacturers, up to about a 155-mile range for school buses. We think, you know, on the manufacturing side, that should be able to cover every school district, almost everyone in the country.
Great. Thank you.
Ben Mendel does want to answer that question. So Ben, you can unmute yourself and answer that question live. That would be great.
Yeah, I was exploring the functionality of that feature. I'm planning to address just that point in my slides coming up in a few on the voucher program, if that's all right. So I think that's okay to wait.
Great, thank you. Pete, was there anything else we should address before moving on?
That's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rica and Sergio Alfonso, for joining us and for all that incredible information. I'm now happy to turn the mic over to another school district. We're joined by Denise Harrington Cohen, who is the Assistant Superintendent for Business for Croton Harmon Schools.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for allowing Croton Harmon to participate. This is a very exciting time for school districts, especially in light of Governor Hochul's climate goals. So there's a lot to cover. I'm going to try to quickly go through because I'd like opportunities for questions. I'm going to begin by discussing a little bit about our journey here in Croton Harmon, where we are today. I'll touch upon the NYSERDA process because I know we have some experts here. And then I'll talk a little bit about the challenges and recommendations that we've gleaned from our experience at the phase we're at today. So our journey has been very deliberate and incentivized by our Board of Education, who has strong sustainability goals. Over the past 2 years, we've been strategizing ways to incorporate EV technology into our transportation operations. To accelerate that process, we established a bus electrification task force that involved community members, other districts, and we gleaned a lot of valuable information from that group. And of course, we would not be here without the efforts of Mothers Out Front, Croton 100, and certainly our supplier Bird Bus, who is an integral part of the application process. And of course, New York State for this funding mechanism. Croton was, I guess it was in November of this year, we were notified by Governor Hochul's office and NYSERDA that we were approved for a $120,000 grant for a 66-passenger vehicle. And it was a great accomplishment for us. It was a long road, but a great accomplishment. The good news about that is that we were set to get a first generation EV bus from Bird Bus, but now where we are today, we're going to be one of the first to get the second generation bus once that bus is delivered. So the time served us. I just wanted to briefly talk about a quick overview about the eligibility. So in really simple terms, NYSERDA looks at the scrappage vehicle and the new vehicle. The scrappage vehicle, they look at fuel type, the age of the vehicle between 1992 and 2009, the mileage and usage requirements for 2 years prior to the new vehicle coming. The new vehicle looks at mileage requirements, and I don't know if this has changed, but during our application, it was 8,000 miles per year for 5 years after the bus hits the road. And it also looks at the communities that you're traveling in. I would applaud NYSERDA. I know that they have modified the program with regard to the scrappage vehicles and some other mileage requirements. And I am not fully aware of those now, but I feel like our voice was heard during this process. So I thank them for responding so quickly. Some of the challenges that a school district faces, I would say, is that all of our transportation proposals need voter approval. We need voter approval for the purchase, leasing, and financing of transportation vehicles. So we are constantly balancing the weight of voter support with our obligation to provide transportation to our students. So we had to be very thoughtful in creating our bus propositions because if it were voted down, we would not have the financing opportunities to purchase the vehicle. So that's a very delicate balance, but with the support of our community and certainly the organizations that are here today, we received a very, very large turnout and positive votes for our proposition. Some of the other challenges, the upfront costs and infrastructure challenges. Here in Croton, we are at a capacity at our bus garage. So we have some challenges there, also some site work that's being done. Generally, if I were to give a recommendation, generally start with infrastructure. But because we were challenged with our infrastructure and we really wanted to capitalize on the opportunity, for this NYSERDA funding, we kind of reversed it. And that served us well, thankfully. Some recommendations. So through the grant application process, I would say your contractor. So we use Bird Bus, who had a grant writer who assisted in the application. So your contractor as a district, the three people involved other than NYSERDA is the contractor and the district. The contractor actually has to submit the grant application and also a vendor application. So we worked with Bird Bus and their grant writer, and I cannot tell you the length and the number of conversations we had in creating our full application and then responding to requests afterwards. So your relationship with that contractor is critical. You want to be with someone that has been through the process before. Another recommendation would be advocacy, 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 advocacy. New York State finance law has many restrictions with regard to some of the newer and emerging financing models. So there are models for financing that are developing as we speak, but because, especially in New York, there are a lot of intricacies and restrictions. So I know that in Governor Hochul's address, she did mention changing some of that with regard to New York State finance law and New York State education law. So that is critical. planning, most important part of the process, creating alliances with advocacy groups, other districts that are a few steps ahead of you, certainly your fiscal advisors for the financing piece, communicating your goals and your hopes with the state education department. We were in contact regularly with facilities planning to kind of navigate this path that is uncharted really in New York at this time. And then of course your utility company, which is a critical component, whether it be NYPA or Con Ed, et cetera. And then also it's just an enormous learning curve. I would say start listening to podcasts. There are a lot out there. If you need any requests, I'm happy to give them to you. Recommendations. I would read periodicals, get on the Department of Energy website that has a whole EV bus section and webinars. There are a lot of agencies out there to support us. Districts are, very stretched right now, especially the business department. So it's really important to have alliances with people who have been through this before and who can support you. I did also have a little something to say about some of the new financing out there from organizations like Highland Electric, and I can certainly speak to that, but I think I've taken a lot of my time already, so maybe we'll open it up for questions at this point.
I'd just like to say I'm Robert Reichenbach from Bird Bus, president. We partnered with Croton Harmon on this, and we were very thankful. Thank you, Denise, for everything that you helped support us with as well. It's like Denise said, it is a partnership with the contractor and distributor. Having that relationship goes both ways. Having that one point person for the application process is very important. And knowing that having the after sales support is also very important. We are the dealership of record and the contractor of record for Croton Harmon. And we've decided that we are moving up to Yorktown, building a facility that's going to be able to charge electric school buses, a brand new facility that will have charging infrastructure for electric school buses and to the public. So it's partnering with the right people to make sure everyone's on the same page. And as we grow together. We have about 80 electric school buses in our pipeline this year. The first of which of the public school systems are going to be going to Croton Harmon up in Westchester. So we're very proud to say that Croton's leading the way.
Thank you, Robert. And to your point regarding a point person in the district, my recommendation is that you have one point person who can be dedicated to this. I would not recommend your business official because they are being pulled in many different directions. There's a lot of back and forth during the application process. So I would suggest maybe your Department of Transportation director, or even someone else within the business office. But it's critical that when requests are made, that they're responded to rapidly in order to get the application moving.
Great. Thank you so much, Denise. Sounds like an incredible amount of work that you've put in, and that will be an incredible resource for other districts, I think, who are starting the same process. So we're so grateful for being here and sharing your knowledge and experience and your recommendations. And Robert, thank you so much for being here. It's very exciting to hear about a facility being built locally in Westchester. I think there may be a couple of questions for you in the chat or in the Q&A. I'm not sure if they're all answerable by you or not. So I'm just taking a look.
Era, I think that a lot of these questions will be answered by upcoming presentations.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Thanks for checking.
We understand. I'm also the president of the New York State School Bus Distributor Association. So on behalf of all the distributors in New York State, we like to applaud Mothers Out Front out there as well. with pushing for electric vehicles. And we want to see a great implementation. We know NYSERDA and the EPA has individualized environmental justice zones, but if we can work together to implement electric bus in a more grand scheme, that's our end goal as well. So we applaud the local school districts, the operators, and all the advocacy groups on the call as well.
Thank you, Robert. Denise, there is a question for you in the chat. Someone wants to know where BOCES has been, if they've been involved at all in this initiative.
Not from Croton Harmon's perspective, no.
Okay, thank you. Great. Well, I think a lot of the questions will probably be move forward to the next speaker. So thank you again, Denise, so much for being here. And we'll certainly be in touch with any follow-up.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm pleased now to turn it over to Benjamin Mandel, who is the Northeast Regional Director for CalSTART. CalSTART administers the Truck Voucher Incentive Program for NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you for being here, Ben.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and to the rest of the volunteers with Mothers Out Front and the Westchester County officials and municipalities supporting this initiative. We're really happy to be here this afternoon. CalSTART leads on outreach efforts in support of the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program, making sure that districts and other types of fleets, including truck and transit fleets, have the right information resources available to them to understand the funding opportunity, what technologies are available for purchase with the support of these wonderful voucher incentive dollars, and what projects may not be the right fit, because it is an involved process, as a few of our speakers have already noted. We want to make sure that everyone's time is well spent toward actionable projects that can capitalize on the funds. So in the following slides, what I'll do is kind of walk you through what the voucher program is, how to make sure you're eligible for funding, and address questions, because I know that will come up. And we've already had the wonderful examples of implementing school districts, including White Plains and Croton Harmon, two of our participating school districts. So I think the natural next question is, how can my district or my organization, in the case of contractors, qualify for some of this funding support? Next slide, please. So fundamentally, the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program is a point of sale incentive program. We call it voucher in the sense that it's a redeemable incentive at the point of purchase, right? So you don't need to make a capital outlay up front and then seek recoupment later as a purchaser. And that's robust to whether you are a school district yourself or if you're a school bus contractor working in coordination with a district. We really rely on partnership between the fleet or the operator, as well as the vendor and the manufacturer. So we've already heard allusion to the fact that folks like Robert at Bird Bus, or like the dealer that Lion works with here locally, those are the folks who are really well versed in program requirements and processes. And it's incumbent on them to submit the documentation, the application, and follow up on all program deliverables to make sure that the money gets paid at the end of the day. Currently, the program has $58.3 million in available funding, of which $5.5 million is expressly dedicated to electric school buses, and another $10 million pot is available for electric vehicles generally in medium and heavy duty classifications, and school buses are one eligible use of that. And I'll dive in more on the specifics. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide at this stage. I want to just orient folks to the size of voucher incentives that could be applicable. So for our school bus categories, I'm going to focus here on the battery electric item. For the larger format, kind of 60 plus passenger formats, those are going to be probably class 8 and therefore qualify for up to $220 in voucher funding to defray the higher capital costs. It's no secret, these technologies are more costly than their diesel counterparts. Some of the smaller format buses can still qualify for upwards of $100,000 or $150,000 in capital support through the program. Next slide, please. So we do want to emphasize that there are kind of locational requirements, right? $5.5 million is significant, but it's not enough to effectuate this whole transition statewide on its own. And so we do want to target, firstly, those locations that are serving and conferring benefits to disadvantaged communities throughout New York State. So the highest funding levels are reserved for these types of applications that can document that either the fleet parking or domicile location or the schools they're serving are located in or within half a mile of a New York State recognized disadvantaged community. Or in cases where neither of those conditions fit, we can work with you to better understand the routing, planned routing for the school bus, and identify whether the route itself operates within or very near to a recognized disadvantaged community. And so I'm showing here a map. Once I'm done, I'll paste a link in the chat for participants to look at the DAC map that NYSERDA has published online, so you can interact with it and understand for particular addresses, do they fall within a DAC? How close are they? And therefore how to make a case to see if you qualify for the highest levels of funding. Now, a question did come up before, well, what if I'm not in a DAC? What if I can't meet that requirement? There are still options available. You heard Senator Harkin mention that Westchester is still a non-attainment county with respect to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And so it's one of the counties here in green, one of 30 counties statewide, that still qualifies for funding through the program, albeit at a slightly lower amount of funding. So instead of getting up to a full 100% of the incremental cost above a diesel bus, these projects would receive only as much as 80% of the incremental cost difference, capped at $150,000. So it is a little bit less, but can still make a meaningful difference as school bus districts and operators are trying to pencil out the economics. The other critical determinant that I want to point out to that's a core requirement of the program, and you've heard Denise and others mention it, is the scrappage of an eligible 2009 or older diesel bus. We need to make sure that bus is still in active operation. So having done at least 2,500 miles in one of the prior 2 school years, here we are providing a little bit of wiggle room and flexibility to accommodate the fact that many districts' buses haven't operated as much during the COVID pandemic. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is prioritize relatively scarce program funds to those projects that can result in the most appreciable emissions reductions, local air pollution improvement, and retirement, demonstrable retirement of old, polluting, and inefficient diesel equipment. So it's important that when you're assessing your fleet's opportunities or your district's opportunities to receive this funding, that you're assessing, do we have 2009 or older equipment available in operation in our fleet to retire and swap out with a new electric bus? However, we have recently, if you just stay on that last slide for a moment, we've recently expanded the program flexibility with respect to the scrappage requirement, as Ms. Cohen indicated. So we recognize that it's a pretty tight needle to thread to make sure that a participating fleet that's interested in new battery electric buses has equipment that meets all of the scrappage requirements and that it's owned and operated for the last 2 years. So we still need to make sure that these old buses that are in operation and meet all other requirements are the ones being retired. But if you're interested and don't have this bus, you may still be able to purchase an eligible bus or procure it in some other form or fashion from another district, right? So we're able to be a little bit more flexible in terms of who has owned, operated, and registered the bus that's going to be scrapped in order to extend eligibility to participate in the incentive program. We also want to emphasize that, again, according to, owing to the potential business interruption that the pandemic has caused, we recognize some fleets are letting vehicle registrations lapse. And so instead of requiring full registration for each of the past 2 years, we're only requiring 24 out of the past 27 months for that bus, that old bus, to have been registered with New York State. Want to share here just an overview very quick. We've got all of the predominant makes and models of electric school bus that are on the market are already eligible for purchase through the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program. So that's the first step, right, is to make sure that the bus you're interested in is eligible. We've got a whole lot of brand new purpose-built models. We also have battery electric repower or retrofit options available for the program, which might be an interesting possibility for certain districts, depending if they may have newer equipment that can qualify to just be repowered rather than outright replaced if it's not old enough for scrappage. So on the next slide, I just want to emphasize a point that I think my colleagues from Con Edison can touch on some more, but we are coordinating with the utilities throughout New York State to implement the medium and heavy duty Make Ready pilot, which is $15 million statewide authorized to support medium and heavy duty vehicle fleets who receive voucher funding as they try to install the appropriate charging infrastructure for those vehicles. So we've worked with Con Ed and the other utilities in New York State, including NYSEG, which also has some service in Westchester, to make sure that we're operating in coordination so that we're communicating with them who our voucher applicants are to make sure they're getting in the hopper for infrastructure assistance and vice versa, right? If fleets are communicating interest in an infrastructure support with the utilities, then we want to know about that too, so we can get them the necessary support on the vehicle side. Next slide, please. So I want to encourage folks to reach out when they have questions. The voucher recipients you've heard from today have mentioned that it can be a kind of iterative process, but that's okay. We have a voucher help center. That's the first point of contact. And you should think of us and them as another partner in getting the project to the finish line. We know there's a lot of requirement, and that's partly a function of the types of funding sources that we're leveraging to make these resources available. And so we will orient you on what kinds of documentation we need and make sure with you that the vehicles you currently have in your fleet to see whether or not they qualify as eligible scrappage buses. And so hopefully we can help to orient folks to make the best decision about whether they qualify and which technology is right for them. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. I think we may have a couple of questions. Peter, Christy, do you have any questions from the chat?
Sarah, there's a question about the funds. Is this a pool of funding until it's gone, or is it for the 2022 calendar or otherwise fiscal period? And that comes from Susie Ross out of Austining.
Thanks for the question, Susie. It's a very fair question. It's one-time funding right now, meaning it's available on a first-come, first-served basis. So the $5.5 million that's expressly authorized for electric school buses is available until it's all snapped up. Currently, there's 2.9 million out of that 5.5 that has not been reserved as of yet. And that fund of $10 million, that's more of a catch-all for battery electric technologies, including school buses, is about halfway through. I believe at last check, there was $4.6 million remaining in that fund. So there's still a good amount of funding available, but we do encourage districts that are interested to still get their expressions of interest in, so we can begin working with you and hopefully reserve dollars while they're still available. We're also cognizant that the number of 2009 or older buses that are still on the road that will qualify for scrappage gets smaller and smaller every year, right? So we want to make sure that you retain eligibility and don't, for instance, prematurely get rid of or otherwise retire equipment that can be used to scrap to make sure you're eligible for program funding.
Okay, I think this question is for you, Ben. Anne Erling is asking if a district, it's a little long, so bear with me. If a district contracts out for busing and the bus contractor uses grant funds to acquire EV buses, who actually owns control of those buses? Is this something that you would cover, or? Okay, and then
I'm happy to address that. Others may have perspectives as well, but from what I've seen in working with this program through NYSERDA is that we try to be very definitive in the application process of who the vendor is and who the vehicle recipient and operator is. So in a case where a school bus contractor is operating buses under, some term contract with the district, that bus would be considered the asset of the contractor. The contractor, rather than the district, would be considered the voucher recipient or the voucher vehicle recipient and working with that vendor. And so just like anything else, in the absence of electric buses or vouchers, that contractor would be responsible for its own bus procurements and then would have those assets regardless of what happens with its contract. The same would be the case with electric and the voucher program.
Okay, and I think that there's a second part here that says, if the district were to switch contractors, can the district access funds again to get EV buses through a new contractor? I think that depends, like you said, on the contractor. So does that make sense?
Right. I would agree. I think at that point it becomes maybe a separate transaction, and the next contractor would then be able to go through the program. There are, caps to keep in mind as a district is maybe benefiting from a voucher in multiple instances. For instance, no public district is able to get more than 5 voucher funded buses. But if for whatever reason a contractor were discontinuing service, we may be able to navigate that. But those are just the sorts of things to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Just one question based on our experience, working with the school districts, trying to go through this process. Can you give a sense of timeline that school districts should anticipate for going through the grant application? Because as Denise spoke about earlier, they're dealing with budget timelines and getting voter approval, and to plan out the school budget, knowing whether or not there'll be grant funding is tricky.
Right, and it's probably most actionable for districts and even contractors for budget purposes to know that you have your voucher funding, your voucher application approved, and therefore the funding reserved. That's probably kind of the critical element. I would say it can certainly take a few months to get to that point, to be very transparent. We find that the better job we do at communicating the requirements in terms of what we're looking for, what we need to see as a scrappage vehicle, and the better understanding the district or the contractor has at the outset, the shorter that timeline will be, because that will require fewer iterations to get the right information to be able to approve the application. So maybe if we have all our ducks in a row, that could take 6 to 8 weeks just to make sure the application is in, we've got all the right information supplied, going between the vendor, coordinating with their fleet. If all the information is accurate from day one, it could take much shorter than that, but we don't see that in many instances. It's a pretty involved application. If there's less familiarity with program requirements as a vendor starts in on the application process, we've definitely had instances where even with good communication, it can take a few months to get that completed.
Thank you. Peter and Christy, are there any other questions that we haven't addressed yet before we move on?
Yeah, just one last question. Janet Harkin, who's working on bringing electric buses to her school district up in the northeast corner, is there any incentive to source renewable electricity for charging? I don't think there is, but good question.
Great question. None to my knowledge.
Yeah. I think that's it, Sarah. Somebody's asking about scrapped diesel buses. What happens to them when they're scrapped?
Yeah, we kind of consider that to be a private transaction. Oftentimes fleets, even transit fleets or trucking fleets, will have a relationship with a dismantler facility. So sometimes they will pay the dismantler to take a vehicle off their hands, and maybe once the vehicle's been rendered useless, it can be sold for scrap value. That's sort of the business that the scrap facilities are in, and the program stays out of that piece of it. But we do have a network of scrappage facilities available statewide, including here downstate, in and around New York City in particular, to help facilitate that part of the process. And hopefully they see a good opportunity in this program generating, let's say the advancement of older less efficient vehicle technologies to the next phase of their lives.
Seems to be it, Sarah.
Okay, thank you so much. So Ben, if you can stick around in case other questions come up, that'll be great. But for now, we'll turn over to our next presenter, John Markowitz, who is Director of E-Mobility Technology and Engineering for New York Power Authority.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I'd like to go through these next slides sort of at light speed, because I think what's more important than me speaking is the questions from the group here of the school districts. So if we can go to the next slide. I know most of the school districts are NYPA energy customers, so you're completely familiar with us, but for those who aren't, we're the largest state-owned electric utility in the country, generate about a quarter of the state's electricity, and the majority of that is hydropower. Next slide, please. And whether you're a NYPA energy customer or you're not, we do have a program where you can increase the amount of renewable energy that you're procuring. And if you're interested in that program, I'd ask you to reach out to us, and I'll put you in contact with our account managers who manage this program. Next slide, please. So the E-Mobility Program that I'm part of, it's a 20-year-old program that NYPA has. It grew out of our R&D program. And together with NYSERDA, we did a number of notable pilots all over the state, everything from transit buses to light-duty vehicles. And our group's growing. We're currently 10 people who specialize in these kind of projects. Next slide. So what I'll do in the presentation, I'll talk about some of our sample projects, some related programs. And then the most important slide, the one I'll spend some time on, is how we could help you support your electric school bus deployment project. Next. So one program we're managing is Evolve New York, and this is a network of highway and urban DC fast chargers for light-duty passenger vehicles all through the state. And the idea is really to build a backbone of fast charging, make it possible to drive from somewhere like Westchester to Buffalo. And at the time we launched this program, it really wasn't possible to do that in an electric car unless it was a Tesla. And the reason I mention this program, not that it's directly related to school buses, but is that because we're building out the largest non-Tesla network in the state, we have a lot of purchasing power. We're buying a lot of this hardware. We currently have a pool of 20 firms that we do competitive mini bids amongst, but they're all on retainer. So we can contract very quickly on our government customers' behalf to build infrastructure at their depots. And we're currently expanding that vendor pool. And here's a picture of one of our Evolve New York fast charging sites in the Hudson Valley. And there's the governor at the grand opening of one of those sites. Next slide, please. So in terms of customer-owned projects, we do a variety of projects, both level 2 charging, which is the parlance for overnight lower speed charging, and also DC fast charging for government workplaces, for their fleets. We've done a lot of public charging stations at municipal parking lots, at Metro North lots, things like that. And we're also very active working with NYSERDA on transit bus charging through the VW bus settlement. Next, please. So here are some sample projects. Here's some customer-owned level 2. We've installed over 400 of these all throughout the state, most of the major cities in the state. Here's an example of a photo of one. And the reason I bring this up is that the lowest cost way of charging an electric school bus would be a level 2 charger, similar to what's pictured here, just a little higher powered. So the ones we put in the municipal parking lot are rated at 6 kilowatts of power. As an example, the ones we put for a school bus would be 19 kilowatts, but gives you a sense of the size of the equipment. Next slide, please. We're also very actively installing DC fast chargers for our government customers. 2 of those are the Thruway and also New York City and also New York State DOT. Where we're building these out in their parking lots and facilities. Next slide, please. And then a very large part of our program is working with all the transit agencies across the state. And this is probably the closest analog to the school bus project. So we're working with just about all the transit agencies in the state putting in these chargers in their bus depots. And as you could see, the hardware is pretty much identical to what we're putting on the interstates. So it speaks to the buying power that we have and the experience of our group managing these projects, that they're very similar in a lot of ways, even though they're very different use cases. And we're installing both the wired type of charging like you'd see on an electric school bus, but we're also doing something called pantograph charging, which is a motorized overhead assembly that mates with the roof of the bus. Next slide, please. This is a photo here of the motorized pantograph charging I just mentioned. Another service that we offer is fleet advisory services. So we have a set of consultants on retainer that can do feasibility studies for our government customers. So anything from plotting out the electrical capacity to facility, route planning, life cycle cost analyses, all of this. We have those folks available as well that we can contract with. And next slide, please. So here are the next steps if you wanted to work with us on a capital project where we build out the chargers for you. And I won't go through all the steps and all the acronyms. I'll leave that for either the Q&A period or if somebody wants to reach out to me offline. But some of the school districts do have pre-existing umbrella agreements with NYPA to do energy efficiency, and we'd use those same exact contract structure that we would for doing a lighting job in one of your school buildings to install DC fast chargers or level 2 chargers in your bus yard. And next slide, please. And we have a similar process for doing the fleet advisory service where we have umbrella agreements and we could provide consulting services. And next slide, please. One example on the advisory services is we're doing a transit bus master planning study with all the upstate and suburban transit bus fleets, including Westchester County. It's a joint project between us, NYSERDA, and DOT, and we brought a consulting team in. Ben is actually on one of the consulting teams. And we're basically plotting out how to get the transit fleets in the state from their current state where they're all doing pilot runs of installing chargers and buses to 100% full electrification, their targets by 2035. So you could imagine there are a ton of logistical challenges, economic challenges to get that done. So we're doing detailed engineering and economic analysis of all the various steps and hurdles, just so that there's a roadmap that can be used for many years to complete that whole process to get to 25% electric by 2025, which is basically like tomorrow in bus procurement time. And then all the way out to 100% electric by 2035. So that's the kind of example of some of the advisory work we're doing. And so yeah, here's the real money slide. So in terms of how we can support your school bus program, primarily we act as an owner's engineer and an advisor, right? Doing engineering, procurement, and construction services on behalf of our government customers. So that would be building out the charging stations, but we can also do feasibility studies, like I mentioned. One important limitation of working with NYPA is we can only do capital projects like building out chargers and doing major electrical upgrades on government facilities. So if you're a district that owns and operates your own buses, you own those school bus yards, then it's easy for us to work with you. If you're using a private contractor, that becomes an issue because we wouldn't be able to do the capital projects at those facilities. We would be able to do some feasibility work because the deliverable would be a report that we'd be handing a government entity, being the school district. So that would be one exception where we could do some feasibility work for you, but not capital if it's on private property. So I hope that's clear. And next slide, please. And that wraps it up. Like I said, I would go through at light speed so we could open it up if there's questions about school bus charging.
Great. Thank you, John. Appreciate getting through so much information in such a short amount of time, very clearly. And I believe we do have questions, so just bear with us one moment. Peter and Christy, do you have any that are jumping out at you?
I'll take the first one. That is actually a really good question. It comes from Sergio from White Plains, who you know well, John. What if the school district leases space to the contractor?
I would think that I'd have to check with our legal group. I would think that would be fine because it's still the school district's property that we'd be working on. You know, the prohibition we have is we can't improve, like do capital improvements on a private building. But yeah, if that school bus yard is still a government property, I think that would be fine.
One question that had come up, I think, in the chat is wondering how NYPA will use new federal funding for EV chargers and infrastructure and how they could help municipalities access those funds.
Yeah, we are monitoring the federal infrastructure funding closely and working with other state agencies on trying to determine what New York's share is, what all the eligibility rules are. So we would be providing those kind of advisory services to any school district that wanted to work with us. But at this point, it's really too early to tell what all the eligibility rules are for that federal funding.
Got it, thank you. And one question, I'm not sure if you can answer or not, but someone posed the question about, I think really about the ability of the grid to absorb all of these electric vehicles. And if we're electrifying the fleet statewide by 2035, how many megawatts would be required for that?
It's a great question. And it's a huge undertaking for all the utilities. Like a typical transit bus depot has something like 250 buses in it. So that becomes something akin to like a small warehouse, which is when it has diesel buses from an electric utility point of view. Once that goes fully electric and each bus is charging at something like 75 to 100 kW in the middle of the night, that building turns into the Empire State Building, you know, from the utility's point of view. So you're doing major upgrades, you know, digging up the streets to provide a lot of new distribution capability to those bus depots. So every new purchase of buses becomes a major capital upgrade to the facility. So the same will apply on the school buses. And for school buses, it's going to be even more challenging because the school bus yards are not always in the major like industrial kind of neighborhoods like a transit bus depot would be in. So that it's going to be challenging to get the power to some of those school bus yards. Which is why it's sort of important to get some of this done at the pilot scale where there's like enough power to do 2 or 3 buses and give the utility some planning time. But that definitely should be part of any project, is to allow, you know, a year, sometimes 2 years to get the electrical upgrades from your utility so you can power the buses.
Great, thank you. Peter and Christy, anything else that needs to be addressed before we move on?
Sarah, there's a question from Padma Sridhar. If the life of a battery is around 10 years, what happens after that in terms of new battery costs and old battery recycling? I'm not sure, John, if you can take this, but.
Yeah, I guess the thing is at the end of life, that battery might still have useful life in a non-transportation purpose. So it would go to like a warehouse or a utility might purchase it. So basically the batteries tend to fade. They call it capacity fade. So maybe it's a 120-mile battery today. 10 years later, maybe it's 60% of that or something like that. So it's maybe not suitable for the transportation purpose, but for, say backing up a solar or a wind facility, it's perfect, right? And it's heavily discounted because it's lived its economically useful life. There's also major plants starting to scale up to recycle all the materials in lithium-ion batteries, basically from the EV industry and all the other appliances we're using these days with lithium-ion batteries. So that industry is scaling up as well.
Great, thank you. I think if there are any leftover questions, we'll try and get to them after the final speaker. So thank you so much, John. I know there's a lot to cover.
Thanks, everyone.
So now we'll turn the panel over to Raghu Sudhakara, who is the Director of E-Mobility and Demonstrations for Con Edison, and he'll discuss incentive programs and school fleet electrification services.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you to Mothers Out Front as well. It's really so happy to be here and be here as the local utility. Let me just start out before even going to the first slide to say I think people that have gone before me in the presentation today, Denise and John and Sergio and Ben and Dr. Rika, made it very easy for me. Covered a lot of the difficult questions, but like John, I'll go fairly at a fast clip so we could save some time for questions. Really, I think the way I sort of organized the talk today that I thought would be really useful to the audience. Briefly, we'll touch upon the White Plains School District experience since Con Edison was a partner in that, and then really talk to some of the offerings we have to make this transition happen. I think it's very, I mean, we've said this openly as well, that for us, electrification is extremely important. And I think at the early part of this presentation, people talked about transportation being sort of a huge emissions contributor. And really, it's the second largest source of emissions in the downstate New York area of carbon emissions, not to mention all the local pollutants and the noise associated with it. So we are very committed to doing this and to doing this fast. The one quick thing I'll add to what John just said is about the undertaking that this involves to really electrify all of the school buses and also all of the transport that we have over the next 15 years or more is going to be a very, very big undertaking. It will involve a lot of grid upgrades, and to the extent that districts are planning major electrification and putting a lot of chargers to charge their buses, we would say to reach out to us very early in your planning stages. I think you heard this already. It could take 18 months to 2 years sometimes if it's a large installation. And also you heard that the power consumption from these buses can be, or from these chargers can be like very, very high in terms of what we see on the grid side of the equation. So with that, I think we could go to the first slide. Really, I won't spend too much time on it because I think there was a really wonderful discussion earlier on this. From our perspective, we were just absolutely happy to be a partner here. The program running from 2018 through 2021 for us for testing was an amazing success. I think you heard of some of the savings that Sergio talked about that you could get from a total cost of ownership perspective. I'll just say one of the test elements that we wanted to test was whether if you have V2G, which is vehicle to grid, which means the battery in the bus, if it's not being used, say on a summer day, exports electricity into the grid when the grid needs it the most. We wanted to test if that actually helps the economics of the buses or hurts the economics of the buses and how that would work. On that, I think really, I'll just say two quick things. And I also want to be transparent about that, which is it's not fully clear that the V2G actually improves the ownership. There's no question just converting to electric is a very, very good and positive move, but I don't know yet that the vehicle to grid like substantially improves the economics that a school district will see. So some of the recommendations will have a report out like later this month or early next month. And really some of our recommendations will be that there needs to be more integrated offerings from a technology perspective to do V2G. And then really also we really, and the other thing we analyzed was the life of the battery. And there is an issue if you really use the battery quite a bit for grid support, then it may have that capacity fade that John was talking about sooner, and schools have to plan for that in terms of the economics of using something like this. So all in all, I just want to say very positive, still highly recommended, but we still have more work to do, and we're committed to sort of testing and partnering with school districts to try out all of this. If we could go to the next slide. So I just want to talk about the medium duty, heavy duty pilot program that we have. So really currently the one set of incentives that Con Edison can offer for school districts that are thinking of going electric is really if you have costs on the utility side. So these are any costs such as trenching or transformer upgrades, et cetera, that normally you would have to otherwise pay for. Con Edison can cover up to 85% of those costs. They're capped at a certain level. I'll just say that for some installations, because if somebody comes and asks us for new service, we already cover that cost. So this doesn't impact everybody, but to the extent that you have an installation that requires some upfront cost that's paid by the customer or by you, then we cover up to 85%. And we have funding that runs through 2022. I do know there's a lot of ambitious goals on school buses and on medium and heavy duty vehicle sector in general at the state level. And there's a lot of activity, that you heard from the assemblyman and the senator early on in the county executive, as well as the implementation of the state's climate law. And so we're just hoping that there could also be more incentives available in the medium and heavy duty sector. So we could actually provide incentives to also cover the customer side costs. Today, we do that for passenger vehicles or light duty vehicles. I'll briefly touch upon that just for completeness at the very end. But for the heavier vehicles, which include school buses, we cover up to 85%. I won't talk a lot about the truck voucher incentive program. You heard from Ben. I'll just say that it's stackable, meaning you could get our incentive and then you could get the truck voucher incentive on top of it. Again, NYPA talked about, or John talked about fleet assessment. We offer two specific types of fleet assessment services that's very much related to the grids and electricity rates. Some of this may be a little bit different for NYPA customers, but I'll just generally say for anybody with a fleet that comes to us, we are able to do some analysis to say, how much power requirement is already there, or how much service is already there on your location. So we could say, if you're going to put two 10 kilowatt, level 2 chargers, which these are the chargers that you charge overnight, there's already enough electric service there, and we don't really need to do any upgrade. However, if you want to do 10 of those, you might need an upgrade. Or if you want a fast charger that could be 50, 100, up to 250 kilowatts, then, what are the upgrades you would need? So we'd sort of help you with that analysis and walk you through that. And to the extent you're on Con Edison rates, we'll also help you on the rate analysis to say, what is the electricity rates you can expect to pay. So I think I mentioned how we help upfront with the utility side costs, the make ready costs, we call it, which is the infrastructure to get the system ready to serve the chargers. We also try to help on the operating side. So I think people have said already, the White Plains district, and maybe that's the Croton experience as well, which is that the operating costs, because there's lower maintenance for EVs or electric buses, you have some savings associated with that. But we offer through the Smart Charge New York program, which you could enroll your buses, incentives to charge during overnight hours. So if you charge past midnight and through 8 a.m. year-round, we give you offline. If you need more information, I could share that. There's also an incentive that we provide per month for the summer months. And that you get that incentive if you avoid a 4-hour period. And this is a little more localized. So, and I could also share that information separately to say which 4-hour period you need to avoid charging. And then you could charge anytime outside of that 4-hour period. And then you get that extra money if you charge overnight. Lastly, I'll end with this. This is really our largest offering that we have. It's called the Power Ready program, which we have since mid-July 2020. This is a program that's really geared towards the passenger vehicles, but to the extent school districts have light duty vehicles that they use for other purposes and you want to electrify, you could tap into these funds. Again, this is for the charger make ready infrastructure. So not the charger itself, but really we will pay anywhere from 50 to 100% of the costs to get the site ready. So both on the utility side of the meters to get the grid ready to serve you, but also on the customer side, so on your property, if you're going to do work that includes like electrical panel upgrades or trenching or new cables, etc., we help pay for that. So let me just stop there and see if there's any questions for me.
Great, thank you so much, Raghu. Pause, see if there are any questions. I think some of the questions are already being taken care of, but I'll double check.
Sarah, there's possibly one that was asked by Linda Gaines, and this could have been during NYPA, about the use of, can you use storage to level the loads, maybe second life batteries? I'm not sure if that one got answered. So
sure,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I could briefly touch upon it. I think absolutely, if there's so-called active load management, which means you just use some kind of a software to manage your charging. And there is storage. You could have on-site storage, or now you also have electric vehicle chargers that come in with inbuilt storage. So all of those are possible if you want to like really manage the energy use like very carefully in order to sort of take advantage, say, of the rate structure that we have, or the Smart Charge New York that I just talked about, where if you avoid charging during certain hours and charge overnight, then you get some incentives from Con Ed, and you could avoid those peak hours by using the battery during that time.
Great, thank you. I believe there was a question, and John touched on this a little bit when we're talking about the grid capabilities and the infrastructure necessary. Is Con Ed looking at, in terms of more rural districts, expanding services and what needs to be done there? I think looking at like maybe northern Westchester.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we're looking really at the whole, like sort of the whole service area that we have holistically. So that definitely includes all of Westchester. And I think really we want to sort of get a better understanding of which areas will electrify first, and then really what are the grid upgrades that are necessary, and what's the level of infrastructure we need. And really we think of it in different like time frames. We think of it like, say, 1 to 2 year time frame, and then in a 10-year time frame, and in the 20-year time frame. So we just want to make sure for all of those time frames we're really having enough service, and we're ahead, in some ways ahead of actually people electrifying, so that they get the service they need on time.
Great, thank you. Peter and Christy, were there any other questions before we move on?
There's
Go ahead.
Somebody asking, is Con Ed and NYPA working together, which I believe they are, and how many chargers per school district?
Yeah, so I'll just say Con Ed and NYPA definitely working together. I think recently John and I met in a meeting. So yes, we talk to each other regularly and support each other. And how many chargers? I think it really depends on the on the number of buses a school district is looking to electrify. Sometimes people use one charger for 2 buses, and sometimes they do one charger per bus. And again, it also depends a little bit on the use case, but really if the school district is coming in the evening and parking overnight, then a slower charger, like which is the level 2 charger, is going to be sufficient because the charge is full by the time you have to use it again during the morning bus ride. And plus, if you have that time, like some people talked about between the morning and the afternoon that you could charge, that you could go with a slower charger. But if you're using it for other purposes during the day and you need a fast charge, then you will require like a higher powered fast charger where you get the bus charged much, much quicker.
Great. Thank you so much for all your expertise. We'll now move on to our next speaker, Patty Buchanan, who is a volunteer leader with Croton 100 and the Climate Reality Project. And Croton 100 is a climate solutions advocacy organization that is helping Croton community achieve its greenhouse gas reduction goals. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. So we're going to do things a little differently here. I'm going to be using several screens on my computer. So I'm getting my screen up and running here. So thank you very much, Sarah, and Mothers Out Front. What a fantastic program this has been. So, one of the biggest impediments we must overcome is the high purchase price for electric buses. And of course, we need subsidies and economies of scale and technology improvements to lower the purchase prices. But in the meantime, there is an extremely important change we can make to get e-bus wheels rolling. So what we need to do is shift the focus away from the high purchase price and focus instead on the total cost of ownership. So electric school buses save money over time, and the more miles a bus drives, the faster and the greater the savings. So Croton 100 and Cure 100 have together created a tool to assist advocates and school decision makers to quantify the total cost of ownership. So this can be a very complex undertaking because there are so many variables that contribute to the total cost of ownership. So I'm going to do a quick demo of a BEST, which is the Bus Electrification for Student Transportation tool that we created that uses an Excel spreadsheet to compare total cost of ownership and greenhouse gas emissions of a fossil fuel bus to an electric bus. So I'm going to just take a moment here to change my screen. I'm going to bring up this Excel spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet is available for free on our website. You do need to download it. You can't work with it directly on our website. And this is essentially what it looks like. I'm going to bring you through several of the screens to show you how you can do a total cost of ownership comparison. So the first thing you're going to see is down here on the bottom of the spreadsheet are the various display sheets within this Excel spreadsheet tool. Right now we're on the introduction screen. I'm going to move us over to the data input screen. And this is the important screen that you're going to work with to begin to understand the total cost of ownership between a fossil fuel bus and an electric bus. So the first thing you're going to see at the top part of the spreadsheet, we're going to be looking at fossil fuel vehicles and their costs. Just below that, we have data input for electric school buses. And then we have a total cost of ownership display screen, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. And then down at the bottom of the spreadsheet, we have a number of resources that are built directly into the spreadsheet that you can access by clicking on a link over here on the right. So let me just show you a few of the ways this works. First of all, this yellow column that you see, this is the only column that you have to do any kind of data input. So all of data input that you're going to use to understand your total cost of ownership is going to be in this yellow column. Now, one of the first questions is going to be, what is the purchase price of the vehicle? Now, one of the things you're going to see is that we've built in resources also here in tabs G and H. In case there's data points that you don't know off the top of your head, you might be able to get some assistance right here on the tool. So just for example, purchase price. If you don't know the purchase price of various vehicles, we've built in a link that's going to take you directly to the New York State Office of General Services that has a listing of all the prices that are on contract for school buses in New York State. So you can look up, for example, the purchase price of an electric bus and a diesel bus right here using this link. One thing I want to say about OGS is it's not really ideal. For one thing, it does not include the vendors of purely electric buses such as Lion and Proterra. They're not on this list. So it's not an ideal collection of information, but it's an okay starting place. The other thing is many of the prices in this spreadsheet, in this contract are out of, they're not current, so that it's not that accurate, but it's an okay starting place. But I just wanted you to see that here in the spreadsheet, tabs G and H, you can find links to help you fill in some of the information as you need. So let's just jump ahead and see what this looks like. I've pre-populated this spreadsheet for the demo. And now if you come down here to the bottom tab, as I was saying, where it shows you the various displays sheets in the spreadsheet, we can go to a total cost of ownership graphic. And I'm going to click on that. And one of the things that you're going to see here is that, and give me just 1 second, I apologize. I wanted to get you something here. So looking at our total cost of ownership, we can, down here on the bottom of the graph is the number of years. This is year 1 through 12, which is the average life of a school bus. And the orange line represents the fossil fuel bus. The yellow line is the electric school bus. Over a 12-year period, we can see here that the electric bus is a little more costly over 12 years. It comes out to about $211,000. And the fossil fuel bus is coming out to $197,000, or a difference of about $14,000. That means the electric school bus is about $14,000 more costly on total cost of ownership. But what's really important is there's other ways we can think about this data to help make our case for total cost of ownership being within reach. So let me show you how we can do that. If we took that $14,000 and spread it over all of the households in the school district, it actually will help to offset the impact. So the way we're displaying the current total cost of ownership, it's by bus, but we have built into the spreadsheet a way that we can look at it based on total households over the district for tax purposes. And so in this particular example, we start by putting in how many households we have in the district. For the sample that I'm using here, Croton, we had 3,394. And you might say, well, I don't know how many school households we have in our school district. So again, I'd invite you to come over here to tabs G and H, where we have resources built right into the spreadsheet. And here we have a link that you can click on to find out the total number of households in your school district. This will take you to the National Center for Educational Statistics. What you do is you just go down here to the box, you type in your school district, and our district popped up, Croton-Harmon Union Free School District. I click on that and it tells me the total number of households in my district. So you can then go to your spreadsheet and put that data in here in this line, 3,394. If you come down here and now look at the total cost of ownership graphic, what you're going to end up seeing is that the electric bus is about $4 more over a 12-year period per household. So here we can make a pretty compelling argument that even though the electric bus is has a higher purchase price, the actual impact to the average taxpayer in the community is $4 over 12 years. So this is a very compelling way to look at how we can deal with the higher purchase price for electric vehicles. And then one other thing I just wanted to show you here, one of the most important variables in these school buses is the number of miles they drive. So if we change the number of miles from, say, from 10,000 miles to 15,000 miles per year, and then we look to see how our total cost of ownership changes. I went down to the cost of ownership tab, and here we can see the electric bus is now actually saving us money over the 12-year period, because the more miles we drive, the faster we're going to have savings. So in this case, at about the 9.5-year mark, we are beginning to see that the electric bus will save the district money. So this is a very compelling case to make, to consider how you use the bus to save money. The more you drive the bus, the more money you're going to save, and the faster you're going to save money. Now, one other feature I want to show you here on this spreadsheet, or this BEST tool, down at the bottom, we also have a carbon graph that shows us how much the greenhouse gases will be emitted by these various vehicles. The blue lines here are for the fossil fuel bus. So we're going to see over the 12-year period, that fossil fuel bus is going to emit about over 300 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Down here, the electric bus, we're assuming that some of the electricity that's going to be used to charge this bus may have fossil fuel in it. We have all of this data built into the spreadsheet. It comes from eGrid, which is a national collection of the mixture of the sources of electricity in our grid system. So all you have to do is put in your zip code, and it will automatically calculate the carbon or greenhouse gas emissions for these vehicles. If you come down, and so this works for any school district in the country. If you come down here to the bottom, as I was saying, you can display the graphical information differently. Here we've put it all together where you can see both the total cost of ownership, the savings for the electric bus, and the carbon savings are showing right here on the graph. So you can use this tool for any decision maker, any advocate in any school district in the country to better understand and quantify the total cost of ownership and a comparison of the fossil fuel emissions from these two vehicles. So I think I'm about at time, so I'm going to turn this back over and to Sarah. And I just want to say my contact information is here if you want to reach out to me directly with any questions you may have about this spreadsheet. So let's see, back to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Patty, so much. It's such an amazing tool to offer both for community members who want to be able to advocate to their school districts and have those conversations, as well as for school business officials who want to really look at the economics of these projects. And also wonderful that you can actually see the climate impact in those calculations as well, something that might be missed otherwise in those conversations. We have just down to our last couple of moments. I know we had so much great information to cover and a lot of questions. So I'll pause now to see if there are questions either for Patty or for any remaining questions for the panelists that we might be able to answer. And I also just want to point out, we will be sending out a recording to all attendees, and we'll try and get all questions answered. We had a question about the life expectancy of an electric bus. Perhaps, I know Robert is still here from Bluebird, or maybe another panelist can answer that as well. or Ben, perhaps you might be able to answer that.
Sorry, took me a while to come off mute. I think what we've seen in the transit space is maybe the best indication we have to go on. Those vehicles, and at least the battery electric powertrains, are warranted for 12 years as kind of a requirement of receiving FTA funding in that space. So I think that's a reasonable expectation in the bus space. Of course, we haven't really seen any buses on the road quite that long to bear out whether or not that's going to be the case.
Sarah, I would also say that the chassis of a bus, which is the main structure, it's about 12 to 14 years lifespan.
Great, thank you, Denise. Peter and Christy, were there any other questions?
Yeah, there was a good question about mechanics, the mechanics for these electric vehicles. Is there any training program? We are working on workforce development on that through the various colleges we have here, specifically Westchester Community College. We have started our own program we've got over 100 electric vehicles. We don't have that many electric buses, but we have electric vehicles, and we started a program educating. But I'll tell you, the maintenance is very, very low on these. They're very, very low. But that's a very good question, and I think it's something that it's another factor that everybody's going to have to work on.
Sarah, there was a question a while ago about asking if anyone has information on electric bus using solar roof and windows for charging.
Okay, I think we'll open that to any of our panelists who have some information on that.
Well, here in Westchester County, we're adding nearly 5 megawatts of solar to our 2 largest bus depots, the one in Valhalla and the other in Yonkers. And, that's tied in with storage, and we're working with NYPA and Con Ed on bringing that. So it's a viable, way to go. And there are programs for adding solar to any facility. So, why not? It makes so much sense. Now, if you talk about putting solar on top of the bus, I just don't think there's enough power currently in solar panels to power or recharge the battery on a school bus.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
I think there was a related question about solar carports for the charging area. So I'm wondering if John or Raghu, you can speak to that, if you have programs that help with that.
Yeah, I could speak to it. Yeah, we do have a solar group at NYPA, and we could help on a project like that, getting solar carports put in. And it doesn't even have to be an asset that would be owned by the school district. It could be done under a power purchase agreement where a third-party solar developer would own the array and then just sell you some of the power. So you'd basically be, leasing out that parking lot for the solar canopy to be on it.
Thanks, John. The only thing I just add is we definitely have a group that helps with the interconnection process. So if you're just wondering how to interconnect it to the grid, we definitely have resources and can help with that.
There was another very good question at the very beginning, Sarah. It was, what were the supply chain issues in Terrytown? What were those issues, and is there any way to make sure that doesn't happen again, or is it just, just supply chain that we have because of COVID, yada yada?
I'm not sure if it was. Sorry for that. And there were delays. I'm not so sure if they're supply chain related rather than more government process related. So there are 2 separate grant applications that had to be done, both one through NYSERDA that the bus company was running, that was initiating, and then there was a separate application process through the funding that Assemblyman Avenatti provided for the district, and that had to go through the assembly. So I think it was more related to holds up, especially due to COVID, that caused a lot of that process to shut down for quite a long time. And I think the only other question maybe we'll try to address, if we can quickly, is there was a mention of retrofitting older buses. And I haven't heard much about that. So I'm wondering if maybe, I think that was Ben who had spoken about that. Right. If you could speak more to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not necessarily as prominent an option, just because it doesn't meet everyone's use cases, but the voucher program does have funding at the lower level of the two. So as long as you're in one of the 30 non-attainment or maintenance area counties in the state, which Westchester is, and you have a diesel engine bus that's at least 6 model years old, you can qualify to work with some of the vendors in our program for a battery electric repower. So that's basically taking out the diesel engine and powertrain equipment, replacing it with a battery electric drive system, as long as the fleet can certify that it plans to keep that vehicle in use for another 10 years, right? And it sort of wants to make sure that its incentives are going to vehicles used durably.
And what would the cost be for the district to do that? Is there a way to ballpark that?
Some districts, it's going to depend on the application, on the type of bus that's currently used. We've seen a few instances with an IC bus that's pretty compatible with one vendor. Some of them find it to be more cost effective, even if they have multiple options. So it really is kind of application dependent in that regard. But we find that the voucher amounts that are applicable for that process, which go up to $150,000, generally are just about as helpful as they would be if you were purchasing a brand new bus.
Great, thank you so much. We are at time, or a little past, so I appreciate everyone bearing with us, and for all of our panelists answering so many questions. I did want to give one of our co-sponsors, Empire Clean Cities, has also a set of tools to offer for this type of technical assistance. So I'm going to turn it over very briefly to David Chernak from Empire Clean Cities, if you'd like to give a quick plug for that program.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it as brief as possible. Hi, everyone. My name is David Chernak. I'm the Communications and Outreach Coordinator for Empire Clean Cities. I'm also a Westchester resident. I live in Terrytown. It's really thrilling to hear about everything that's going on in Westchester as it pertains to school bus electrification. Empire Clean Cities is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're one of the more than 75 Clean Cities coalitions across the country. It's a DOE program. Specifically, we serve the Lower Hudson Valley and the 5 boroughs of New York City. And our mission is to promote the advancement of alternative fuels, vehicles and technologies that improve air quality, reduce GHG emissions, and displace petroleum consumption. It's also our mission to foster awareness and provide access to reliable information about alternative fuels, advanced fuel vehicle technologies, including alternative fuel school buses and especially electric school buses. And I just wanted to share a resource that Clean Cities and the Alternative Fuel Data Center have produced and are putting out. The AFDC is a resource from the DOE, from their Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. So they're releasing a technical assistance series that's focused on school bus electrification, and it's going to be an 8-module series. The first module is now out. It's a lot of introductory information in that first module, maybe a little bit of a repeat of what you've already heard here. But the following modules are going to dive really deep into a lot of the kind of green jobs development, the infrastructure, and a lot of the other implications for school bus fleets, both for districts and for school bus fleet contractors. And it's just going to be a really great resource for everyone here who is obviously on the forefront and really wants to be an early adopter of ESBs. And ECC as an organization, we're also very happy to assist communities, districts that are interested in other aspects of clean transportation, even beyond electric school buses, alternative fuel vehicles, electric vehicles, public charging, etc. So if you're interested, please feel free to contact me at david@empirecleancities.org, or empirecleancities.org is our website. And thanks everyone for attending. Thanks Mothers Out Front, all the other co-sponsors of this event. It was absolutely fantastic. And it's so excited from the organizational side to see all the great momentum with ESPs.
Great, thank you so much, David. And we'll send out that information with our follow-up to attendees. So just on behalf of our Mothers Out Front teams, just want to give a thanks again to all of our panelists for sharing their time with us today, our elected officials who joined us as well. A special thanks again to Peter McCart, JP O'Malley, our amazing video editor, Millie Beresteggi, our Mothers Out Front volunteer who spoke on the video. And I want to give a shout out to my team members, our team members who aren't speaking right now, but Amy Hill, Megan Dyer, Donna O'Malley, Christy Cohen, who you heard a little bit from, and Christina Arnold for their tireless work behind the scenes on this. And I also want to give a big thank you to all of you community members who showed up today, and to our school district administrators, transportation supervisors, and school board members who came today. We know there are so many issues on your plate, and transitioning our fleets will take time and resources. But every diesel or gas bus we purchase is a long-term investment in pollution that will harm our children's future. So we really appreciate that you're making this a priority. We look forward to continuing the discussion with you in the future. Please be in touch with us. Our contact information is here. And let us know if there's other ways we can move this forward, other topics for similar conversations to help with this fleet electrification. And thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.